Hey guys, I'm going to try again for the video that I first tried to do this morning based on the date. July 11th is always a really important date for me because July 11th, 2002 is when I moved to the Philippines. And I've been kind of reflecting on that. I always do when it's I always do on this date. And I thought I would share with some of you a little bit more about my background because I have mentioned that I was in the Philippines for 11 years, but I have had some people email me and ask questions. What were you doing there? What agency were you with? And that kind of thing. So I'll try to share that in a really concise form for you. When I first moved to Manila, I was with an agency called the International Mission Board, and that is the sending agency of the Southern Baptist Convention, their mission agency. And they have a pretty rigorous process, interviews and all that for getting appointed with them. But the really neat thing is if you work with the International Mission Board, if you're a missionary for them, then they pretty much take care of all of your expenses. Now, the agency is experimenting with other ways of doing missions now, but during that time, if you were appointed with the International Mission Board, they took care of all of your living expenses. They gave you a small salary, and so for my first 3 years in the Philippines, I really didn't have to be concerned with raising money or fundraising, earning money, anything like that. That was all taken care of by the agency. And what we were doing there is we were basically it was college ministry. We were approaching groups of students and talking to them, and if they seemed interested, we would do small group Bible studies with them. And that was my bread and butter, I guess, so to speak, for really my first 9 years in the Philippines. That was the real emphasis of what I was doing while I was there. Now, after I had spent 3 years in Manila, I kind of had finished the contract, if you will, with the agency I was working with. We call it a term. It's not a contract, but you get the idea. I had only been the agency and I only had an agreement for 3 years, and I finished that, but I felt like I really needed to stay in Manila. And what I ended up doing is I went from being a missionary of the International Mission Board to being more of a self-funded missionary. So what I did is I asked my home church if they would open up a ministry account for me, and people could donate to that specific account, and that's where my living expenses would come from. So the church kind of treated me as kind of an individual contractor, I guess you could say. But it worked out well because that way if someone sent money for that, it was tax deductible, and there was also some financial accountability in that. In other words, if people just sent money straight to me and not through a church, then they would not get a tax benefit, and they really would not have any. There wouldn't be any accountability with that. They wouldn't know if anyone has eyes on the money coming in versus my living expenses and all that. So, 2005, that's when I switched to being more of a self-funded missionary. It really didn't change my ministry that much. I was still working with the same people. The only thing that changed was my funding source. Now, about that time, 2005, that's when I got a little bit more involved with the ministry. My ministry got a little bit more involved with, or I got a little bit more involved with helping students deal with relationship issues. So I eventually had the opportunity to write a couple of books. I wrote a book in 2008 and then another one in 2010. You can check them out on my website, but they're really, for all practical purposes, are really only available in the Philippines. I think there are some options for buying them online, but I really haven't looked into it that much. But anyway, I had the opportunity to write those books and to speak to thousands of students around Manila. I was even on the 700 Club Asia once, and I think they re-air that episode every once in a while, some of the segments we did. I did a buddy of mine and I did a radio show together, and same idea. we were answering questions that teenagers had about relationships. So even though I was mainly doing the small group Bible studies, that was the main gist of my ministry, this other aspect had also really expanded and grew. So basically, that's my first 9 years in Manila summarized. That's what I was doing. Once I reached the end of my time in Manila, this is 2011, things were not going as well anymore because, as I've mentioned in another video, I was having a problem with my landlord. The place I was living was really important for my ministry because it was close to one of the campuses. But my landlord was wanting, I had moved into an apartment in 2010, not realizing that the management of that apartment was really shady. And the first year was fine, but at the end of that first year, they were asking for it was over $1,000 in additional security deposits, and they were asking for checks, post-dated checks, and just all this nonsense. So I was like, I'm not going to be able to live here much longer because there's no way I'm signing this lease. I would have had to have been an idiot to sign the lease. And there were other aspects of the ministry that were not going as well. Just opportunities closing. Wasn't anything that I could control, but some of the opportunities that I had on certain campuses were not there anymore. And I had begun to think about going somewhere else in the Philippines. So what this was, I remember it was, I believe, September of 2011. I went to visit my friend Erwin. I had mentioned him. We did the radio show together. We had done some ministry together. He has been my friend since 2007, I think, is when he and I became friends. So I visited him in Angeles City. It's about an hour away from Manila. And at the time, I wasn't really thinking about moving there. It's just went to hang out with one of my buddies. And when I got to Angeles City, I saw the little church that he was starting there, and it just kind of hit me, why not move to Angeles City? It's something that had been kind of stirring in my heart for a while. And then once that thought came to my mind, I had perfect peace about it. Those of you who are out there watching this who are believers know that a lot of times when one of the tests we use for knowing if something is in God's will is there's a peace about it. And I really had perfect peace about packing up and moving to Angeles City. So I did. I was still a bachelor at the time, and I didn't really have any reason to stay in Manila any longer as far as I was concerned. So on November 1st, 2011, that's when I moved to Angeles City. I chose November 1st because that's All Saints Day, and I knew there would not be any traffic in Manila. It's one of the few days where there's not any traffic in Manila. And as I've shared in another video, not a future one, as I've shared in another video where I talk about how I met my wife, basically the day that I moved to Angeles City, my first day in Angeles City, she added me on Facebook. So we chatted. I visited her in Macau, as I said in the other video, and we got married in March of 2012. And so my last year and a half, 2 years were spent in Angeles City, and it was very different than my life in Manila. For one thing, of course, I was married, but it was that was also a really fun season in my life. I did enjoy living in Angeles City. I enjoyed the fact that it had all the amenities of Manila, or most of them, with less hassle, and made a lot of good friends there. So anyway, that's just kind of a quick drive-by version of my 11 years in the Philippines, and it was just a really awesome time. I feel very grateful that I had the opportunity to live in Manila for that time frame, and which it's about a quarter of my life if you think about it. And so that's why it's influenced me so much, and that's one of the reasons that I've been making these videos, because I just want to share what I've learned and what I've experienced there. So anyway, that's a quick version. That's basically 11 years in 10 minutes. So hope this video gives you a little bit of background on who I am.